Governments are no longer denying it. The military are no longer denying it. And even mainstream media no longer denies it. They're here and have been here for a very long time. The Mutual UFO Network has been on the front lines uncovering the truth since 1969. And now we're sharing the truth with you. Welcome to MUFON's What's Up with hosts Katie Grabowski, Christopher DiPerno, and Katie Cook, exclusively on the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. Wondering what's up? So are we.
What's up? It is Turkey Thursday night, and you are listening to MUFON What's Up Radio, the show that says discovery starts with curiosity and curiosity starts with MUFON. I am your host, Katie Grabowski, Colorado MUFON State Director and Star Team Investigator, and we have got a great show for you tonight. We have David Marler coming in the second half, so welcome and happy Thanksgiving to all of you for the best 2 hours of the latest UFO news and discussion brought to you by KGRADB.com. As always, we endorse MUFON. MUFON has been on the front lines trying to find answers to that most important question, really, are we alone in the universe? Before we get started with our guest and our awesome show tonight for this holiday, I would like to introduce my wonderful co-host. She has been really investigating so many of the paranormals for a very long time. Miss Katie Cook. Happy Thanksgiving, Katie.
Happy Thanksgiving, Katie G. Good to see you. I'm excited to have another show. This is going to be a really good one.
It is. And also he is a major crime scene retired detective, and he is Assistant State Director for New York, Mr. Chris DiPerno. Happy Thanksgiving,
hey, everybody.
Chris.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Woohoo!
Hey, woohoo! It's Turkey Day coming up, and we're going to have a great show tonight. Oh, God, Dave Marler is going to be awesome and stuff.
Yeah. I traded in the wine for some water. You know, wine with turkey. The tryptophan's kicked in, but I got water now, so I'm all good.
There you go.
And, you know, I do the fake turkey, so I don't guess I really get the tryptophan. So
that's good. You won't be dozing off. Katie will be carrying us through the night.
All right, true. Katie.
So, Katie, do you have something to kick us off tonight?
I do. I've got a UFO meme with a Thanksgiving theme. This one's cute, Amanda. Yeah, throw that up there. Oh, my gosh. How fun is this? For anyone that's just listening, it's these aliens. They're in a ship. They're clearly looking at Earth. And it says, last month they were lobotomizing pumpkins. Now they're shoving bread up a turkey's ass. This planet has issues, Bert.
Yeah, boy, do we.
We have a few issues, definitely. Oh, and now it's time for the paranormal pop of the week. I know you guys look forward to this. How cute is this guy? It's a Sasquatch foot.
Oh, my God.
With chocolate sprinkles. It's salted caramel. I just love this one. It's also gluten-free. I know that's really good. And yeah, you guys just got to support this awesome small American business. You know, you want to put this in somebody's stocking for Christmas. I'm sure you know somebody that would love these. And they have all kinds of characters, and we're just going to show a different one every week. You can order them at paranormalpops.com. Oh, this one smells so good. I know I say that every week, but I'm like, I almost want the show to be over so I can just dig in.
You know, Cookie, I have to tell you something. I ordered some from Paranormal Pops, too. I got my alien, but here's something that's just going to sit on my desk. It's my angel wings from Angelia Sheard's memory. Yeah. And they are not to be eaten. They're to remind me what a wonderful mentor she was, what a wonderful friend she was. And when I opened these up, I'll tell you, tears started coming to my eyes because I miss her so much. She was such a great friend. And these sit on my desk to remind me about Angie.
She truly was an angel. And of course, Wendy, who started Paranormal Pops, swears that Angelia gave her the idea. And that's why she makes the angel wings as well. I just love that.
And they couldn't make it better than vanilla, vanilla chocolate. That's the best.
So good. So good. And one more quick shout out. I don't know if you can see my t-shirt here. I'll set up a little bit. The Saucer logo. I love Saucer brand clothing. They're so comfortable. I love this classic logo. And I put together a little video of me modeling. Amanda?
I love it.
Oh yeah.
Woohoo!
Oh yeah. Seriously though, this
Simple,
classic
simple.
saucer logo just made me fall in love with them. And you can order it at saucerco.com. Check out everything they have. I met them at the MUFON Symposium a couple of years ago. And again, just a small family-run business, which I love to support those. And the clothing is really, really well made. So I'm a big fan.
What great Christmas gifts too. I know what everybody else can get me for Christmas. I'm going to send a little hints.
Or not so subtle hints. I'm all about the bold hints. All right, Chris, I think it's time for UFO news and person of interest, right?
Yeah, I think we got something really great this time. Amanda? Here's something that's coming right off the wire. Senator Gillibrand pens a defense bill amendment to create a UFO study office. There are fast-moving parts to the UFO problem concerning the United States government this year, including the report to Congress this past summer. So Democrat Senator from New York, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, introduced legislation to establish, by amendment to the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, an office in the Department of Defense to study UFOs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, as the new wave talks about. The amendment language proposes new institutional arrangements devoting substantial resources and to draw on UAP-related expertise from outside the government. Hello, MUFON. They've been on the front lines for years, and now they're asking for outside the government to get them information. According to Section 1652 of the proposed bill, which Congress could pick up as soon as later this month, the new office would replace the present Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force program by the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence. Folks, our MUFON field investigators and UFO researchers can do this with ease. We've been doing it for years. If this happens, the first call should be to, well, you know who, MUFON. All right, now our second story, and this is kind of a whodunit. Unknown submerged object damages the United States submarine USS Connecticut. In the middle of rising tensions between the United States and its allies with China over the growing desire to repatriate Taiwan, which is the United States and others have vowed to protect from Chinese aggression, the USS Connecticut was struck by an underwater object of unknown nature in the South China Sea. This incident is of interest to MUFON as the South China Sea has long been associated with the phenomenon that could be suspected as a USO. Related incident. Newspaper reports as early as the 19th century describe an orb-like object interacting with ships. During the Vietnam War, American sailors frequently described incidents in the South China Sea. One particular MUFON case was a sailor described seeing a massive egg-shaped object rise out of the sea. It was as big as a football stadium and had rows of green and red lights around the equator. Can you imagine him trying to explain that to his other shipmates? The USS Connecticut, a nuclear-powered submarine, was on a normal patrol. 11 sailors were injured, none seriously, thank God. The sub's nuclear reactor was not damaged, thank God, and the vessel returned to Guam for repairs. The Chinese government is requesting that the United States provide details of the incident which happened in international waters. The Associated Press reported unnamed officials verified the submarine did not strike another submarine. This, however, adds to the mystery. Excuse me. It reported that the submarine probably hit something big and was going pretty fast. A United States spokesman said that it was possible the sub struck a sunken vessel or other unknown sunken object. Unidentified submerged object. Folks, I got to laugh at this because you got a highly advanced nuclear submarine and you know it didn't hit another submarine, all right, but it hit something that was going fast. Sunken ships don't go fast, at least not that I have learned, okay? Rocks in the bottom of the ocean do not go fast. So it was something that was moving, unless you got a giant squid or megalodon down there that's bigger than the submarine, it ain't nothing that we know about, all right? Well, that's the news for the week.
I was going to say, maybe he had a really fast-moving whale. I don't know. I know.
Yeah, wow. If a nuclear-powered submarine couldn't handle a whale and got that much damage, we better start checking our nuclear-powered submarines.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Oh, man.
All right. Hey, listen, Amanda, what do we say is our person of interest this week? Well, our person of interest this week is retired Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, now deceased, Philip Corso. Now, our person of interest, Lieutenant Corso, you know, he wrote a book called The Day After Roswell. This book at one time caused some great controversy. Some believe that this was the tell-all from somebody in the know about alien technology, reverse engineering, alien craft retrieval. And others believe it was just a publicity stunt by someone trying to gain attention in the UFO scene. But before we look at what he claimed, I want you to look at the man himself. So let's take a look at Lieutenant Colonel Corso and his Army career. Amanda, put that up there. Thank you. You got to see that this guy's career history was all about intelligence. He went to intelligence schools. He went to intelligence thing. He was a interpreter for the U.S. government. He was an interrogator and did Italian prisoners. So he was trained, but also he was trained for combat intelligence, and he was trained by the British military. Next one, Amanda. In this one, you could see the Corso went to the Strategic Intelligence School after going to artillery school. Now, ask yourself, why would an artillery officer be taken and gone to the Strategic Intelligence School? Because he's got an intelligent background, and they're giving him a cover story so he can be an intelligence officer and go anywhere under the guise of an artillery officer. That's quite common in military intelligence. Next one, Amanda. So in the picture, you see three that Lieutenant Corso being knighted by the King of Italy. Now, if you're a goof and you don't know what you're talking about, the King of Italy is not going to knight you. But you can see right in his Form 66 that he was knighted by the King of Italy, and he is awarded the Legion of Merit. So this guy was no slouch. He worked. And did you know that this guy got 3,000 Jewish refugees to Palestine? And in Korea, he became one of General MacArthur's intelligence officers. One thing about Lieutenant Corso, that he had a photographic memory. Not a lot of people knew that, but he did. And that's why with only 2 years of college under his belt, he was able to rise to the rank of lieutenant colonel. All right, Amanda, the next one. As you can see, Corso is not only the chief of the Foreign Technology Division, which would have dealt with all foreign technology, including alien technology, but also he was at one time the Inspector General. Now, that's important because they don't give that job to anybody. If you're the Inspector General, you got to be absolutely right on the button. You got to know, because you're dealing with people's lives in that position. You're dealing with people's careers, and you're also representing the United States Army. So if you're in the position of Inspector General, you got to have, you know what, together. Not giving that to anybody. It's a position where you got to have everything together. Now, people will say, but he was an artillery officer. What better place to put a spy that you're grooming in a battery of nukes? And that's exactly what he commanded, was a battery of nukes. All right, and here's our last record. As you can see, Corso's main service was in the military of intelligence, from interpreter to interrogation to intelligence staff to teaching intelligence. So do I think Corso was the real deal in intelligence? Yes, absolutely. Do I believe, well, as everybody has said, about alien technology is accurate? That's still a mystery. It's up to you to decide. But before I close, here are some small clips from Philip Corso Jr. about his father. See what you think.
Colorful story. We had a lot of scientists show up at the house. They said, well, we wondered, when he wrote the book, scientists showed up and they said, we wondered between 1960 and 63, something strange happened. The laser went from this size down to a pointer, so on and so on and so on and so on. So they knew there was a tremendous advancement. Now, I must say this. My father was very down on the Air Force, not the Air Force, not the normal men. He was very down on the commander, the what would you call it, the general in charge. Dad would stand up when Reagan would call him behind the desk in attention, and so he went to Reagan and he says, we need a planetary defense system, which is SDI. And my father, by the way, we visited White Sands And the curator came out and almost fell over when he saw my dad and showed him the first DEW weapon that they had developed during that time. And it's in the museum in White Sands, New Mexico. So my father was into the SDI, helping to develop it for President Reagan. And it was a war against the aliens. They were literally raping our military bases.
What do you mean raping?
At that time, nobody knew, but you do know about Reagan in the UN saying if we would all unite, if we had a enemy come in from space. Well, we did have an enemy come from space. Russia did not fail. It was not a Cold War. It was a hot war. They were on our side, believe it or not. We did space missions with them at that time, which you probably know, and such, during the so-called Cold War. Yeah, now it ends up that we put up the SDI. It stops most of this. And my father said, at that time, we are equal in technology to the others. Mm-hmm. Here's one of the main things my father said. He was afraid that unfair technology would be taken by certain alien technology would be taken by certain corporations, and they would become world dominating. So I calls my dad over one day. Dad said, and says, where are they from? And Dad says, we don't know. He says, what's their agenda? What are they after? And Dad says, we don't know. He says, well, what do we know? He says, our airspace have been penetrated, so we have to treat them as foe. So I says, well, what's your recommendation, Corso? And he says, I recommend you and I are old soldiers, so let's just say nothing. NSA, FBI, everybody jumps on this bandwagon. My father used to say the government was so inefficient it covers itself up. They came to the house to arrest my father after the book. And he says, you can't do that. I was the classifying officer, and I declassify it, and it's written in there. I can declassify it anytime, civilian, such like that. So Dad says, I declassify it here and there. End of story.
Now, ask yourself this. Wow. If this guy was a crackpot, if he was telling tales out of school, why would the FBI come to arrest this guy? A decorated, highly decorated lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and they go to try to arrest him. Doesn't make sense. You know what, folks? Lieutenant Colonel, he's a man of controversy, but you look at the evidence, you decide. And folks, that's our person of interest this week. Katie?
Wow. Yeah, that is something else. And you know, the whole, you know, that we're at war with them. There's that threat piece again that we talked about last week. You know, that's a scary thought. Well, I like the quote that the government's so disorganized they cover themselves up. That made me chuckle.
That's absolutely true. And you will hear now a lot of people in ufology are starting to say the word possibility of a threat.
Yeah.
Richard Dolan has said that to me. Also, look at Admiral Wilson. Remember, he said that he couldn't get into certain technology because it was only in private industries. What Philip Corso says the same thing. The military is being blocked out by private corporations. They're getting the funding from the military, but they're not allowed to see what's going on. Very strange things happening.
Yeah. Things aren't always as they seem sometimes. I mean, with you know, Russia helping us and all that, you know, it just makes you kind of question everything, really.
Well, we should question everything. We need to stay in that middle ground and not, you know, be sold on one idea or the other. I think the more we can stay in the middle and be critical thinkers, we have to do this. That's really great job bringing that to us, Chris. I love that.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah.
You got it.
So for chapter news, I went a little silly. I kind of made a funny little silly video, so it makes me laugh a little bit. I'm just going to say I want to apologize to Linda Fletchner because I said Fletcher in the video and I didn't go back and edit it. So Linda Fletchner, I apologize to you ahead of time. So Amanda, if we can roll my little chapter news video, just had some fun with it.
Okay, for this week's chapter news, I wanted to congratulate all of MUFON's new field investigators and also recognize and congratulate our newest appointees. So, I mean, our field investigators are the heart of MUFON. that's what we're all about. So I'm very excited to welcome all of you aboard. I want to apologize ahead of time if I butcher your last name or your first name. It could go either way, really. So I'm going to put on my glasses here so I can read. So let's get started here. All right. MUFON would like to welcome aboard our newest field investigators, and they are Christopher Shuck out of Florida, Nick Notzel out of Oklahoma, Devin Carney out of North Carolina, Amy Babbage from Connecticut, John Wright from New York, Beverly Moore from Iowa, and Julie Carncella from Pennsylvania. So congratulations to all of you new field investigators and welcome aboard. I think we have the East Coast covered there pretty good. That's pretty awesome. Our newest appointees are Hannah Trimble. She's in the MUFON office in Ohio, and Hannah does so much work for MUFON. So thank you so much, Hannah, for all that you do. Marketa Tomova, a MUFON Symposium lead in California. Marketa ran the office there in Irvine for years and is just leading the ship in MUFON. I thank her for everything that Marketa does. And as many of you know, the MUFON Symposium will be in Denver 2022, July 8th through the 10th. And I couldn't do it without Marketa's help. So thank you so much, Marketa, and congratulations. So Earl Gray Anderson, there's a name we all recognize and we know and love. State Director of California, congratulations, Earl. Linda Fletcher, Assistant State Director in California. Linda does so much work with the MUFON store. Thank you, Linda, for everything that you do for MUFON. Bill Kidd, Assistant State Director of Kentucky. John Price, Assistant State Director for Alabama. Michael Barrett, Assistant State Director, CAG and ERT. CAG stands for Case Assistance Group. And the ERT, as many of you know from Gwen, is the Experiencer Resource Team. So he's got a lot on his plate. Congratulations there. Let's see, we have, and he's from Rhode Island. Seth Feinstein, Assistant State Director and CAG in North Dakota. Kirk Beal, Chief Investigator, Tennessee. Jean Francis Opsomer, Assistant National Director in France, and I apologize if I got that wrong there. Congratulations to all of you. It's just so awesome, and all the hard work. We're all volunteers here, and we're all just working together. And that's what MUFON's really about, is our members and its people and all the work that we all do to try and answer this question and learn from each other. And for me, learning from all of you is the best thing ever. So again, congratulations, everybody. See you next week.
Yay, everybody.
Silly. Okay, Chris, I heard that you caught up again with Bob Spearing. Is that right, for some international news?
I did. And what he wants to do is, he had a interesting case out of France, but it turned out to be a zero. But he wanted to show us, to teach us exactly why it's a hoax. You want to roll that, Amanda?
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Spearing, MUFON's Director of Investigations for International. And this week, I'd like to show you something that came out of France. MUFON case 119170. MUFON gets a lot of video, a lot of photographs that people send in reports. Sometimes people send in hoaxes. And we have a good one here. It was captured the other day in the south of France, and I'm going to ask Chris to let it roll, and then I'll give you some analysis about it afterwards. Let it roll, Chris. 40 seconds. Okay, so basically in this 40-second video, the person reporting it said that they were sitting around a barbecue when they happened to see this happen. Interestingly enough, it's very, very bright. Second, there's no audio to the video, which is a tip-off that they don't want you to know what they might be saying while the video is playing. Towards the end, the video starts to do hula hoops up in the sky before going straight down. That is an obvious signature of a drone. It's a drone that's simply dressed up with an orange light, which you can find anywhere on Amazon or any of the drone sites. So basically what we have here is a hoax. It was a real object because you may have seen a green reflection going along with it at one point. That's an internal camera lens. So it was definitely an object outside of the camera lens, a real object, but there's no way it's anything other than a drone. And that's it from the international side this week. I'd like to thank Chris for letting me come on, and hopefully I'll see you next week.
Oh, man, he is incredible, isn't he? I mean, he can pick this stuff out. And what he does, he breaks it right down. He doesn't just say it's a drone. He breaks it right down by the pixel. He has certain software and everything that he can break it down and actually see what exactly it is. And he picks up things like the green lens. I didn't pick that up. He picks up, he says, oh, hey, Chris, see the green lens reflection? That's the internal camera. He says that's an absolute hoax.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to learn so much more about cameras and how much that is really at the bottom of what people think they're seeing. I mean, I could kind of tell with that one. Well, like you said, no sound. You're kind of like, what's going on there? And then it just seemed too close. It just sort of felt like a toy. But yeah, like you said, he really breaks it down and tells us what to be looking for. And yeah, that lens thing, it's a dead giveaway. He's very, very good. And KDG, I saw you were, while you were watching it, you're like, I know exactly what's going on with this, right?
Yeah, there are some tall tale signs, which Bob talked about. I always like to see how a craft exits and, if it's starting to descend, eventually these drones have to come down and land. So if you're able to watch them and ask your witnesses, how did it exit? It's always a kind of a tell.
Well, I could tell you, if you saw something that was real like that, the first thing out of your mouth is, Charlie, what the hell is that flying above us, And like Bob said, when there's no voice or anything like that, you don't see the excitement and everything as far as, I mean, obviously anybody that saw a craft that was doing that above them that was legit, there'd probably be a lot of stuff we'd have to blank out, I would imagine.
I would think so. Yeah. And as it's going down, you'd be like running towards it or running in your house. I don't know. It depends,
Well, yeah, that's the other thing.
I'm going with you.
Hey, Chris, you caught up with Gwen Farrell again this week from MUFON ERT, right?
I did. And I posed questions to her. I really put her on the spot. And I posed some interesting questions to her about abductions and experiences. I'll tell you, this lady's on the ball. Amanda, would you roll that tape? Hey, everybody. I'm here with Gwen Farrell, the head of the ERT team. And Gwen, our readers have so many questions for you. So I've taken some of these questions, and we're going to ask you, Gwen. But first, how are you, Gwen?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing awesome. So being the head of the ERT team, we got to ask you these questions. First one is, are there more female or male experiencers? Do you know?
I don't think anyone really knows because no real solid statistics have been ever put together for that everyone accepts. However, I can tell you after my many years of practice with experiencers that we have more reports from females. Now, that doesn't mean that there are more female contactees or abductees, but there are usually more reports from females. And I think that is probably because women tend to be more open about their feelings. They're more comfortable sharing, reaching out for help than most guys are. So the answer to your question, I don't have any numbers for you, but I can tell you more females reach out for help.
I can agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of males wouldn't report it and stuff. But I'm going to piggyback on that question a bit. Are there more reports of positive or negative experiences?
That has kind of changed over time. Back in the 50s, when this field started to really open up and people into the public mind, people were aware of what was going on. There were more what we would consider negative or non-beneficial reports of events. However, since that time, the last 20 years or so, they seem to be moving a bit more towards the positive side. And right now, we find a lot of mixed reports of events. So someone will say, well, when I had my first contact, it was really scary and I didn't like it. It was very negative, but I had a few more and they got better. And now I'm okay with them. So it's unusual. overall, we have fewer negative than we used to.
Awesome. Hey, what about the age of contact? We have any information about age of contact, and are all experiencers lifelong contactees?
We do know that many people begin contact when they're very young, as children, and they may have contact only up until a certain age. However, they may have contact throughout their lives. Maybe they'll go until teen years and then it'll drop off. That's very common. And if they have contact again, it won't be until they're adults. However, some people have it all the way through their lives, and some people never get contacted until they're adults. There's a lot of variation in that, and we don't really understand why.
Now, here's a big question. Are there certain physical traits that make up more likely do you have a contact and experience? Blood type, eye color, anything like that we know?
There again, we don't have any solid evidence that there are specific physical characteristics. However, we do know that contact seems to run in families. So there may be some kind of a genetic thing involved in that. If you are a contactee, it's highly likely that someone in your family is also, even though they don't talk about it. But that's one of the most common things we have found. Also, there seems to be possibly a link with blood type. That is the Rh negative blood factor, because many experiencers report that they are Rh negative. They have different types, but that when it comes to the Rh factor, it will be negative. So that is likely as well. Those are really the only two things that seem to maybe make a difference.
And Gwen, my last question for you, and this is a toughie. Abductees often report being told things by non-human entities. What are some of the most common themes? What are they talking about? Are they nuclear weapons, climate change, genetics? What?
You're right in that many people do report, especially in later years, they report information that was given to them by ETs or otherworldly beings. Tends toward environmental information, warnings about things that we need to look more carefully about in our environment, how to protect the environment and Earth and the other human beings that we live with. Some of them are spiritual messages. Many people believe that they've gotten information that we are growing, or they talk about moving to a higher frequency, which would be a spiritual, perhaps a cognitive or some kind of a mental level. And then some people are given just personal information, messages for them, messages for their families, or something of that nature.
Now, Gwen, you just authored a book that's absolutely amazing. Tell the listeners all about it.
Okay, great. Thank you for asking. The book is called Forbidden Questions, A Guide to Human ET Contact. I named it that because it contains questions and answers from experiencers that I have worked with, hundreds of experiencers over the years in my therapy practice and in groups. These are the kinds of questions that people cannot ask anyone else. And so they have asked me, and I have put it in the book. It has been called a mini encyclopedia of the ET human contact phenomenon because it touches on every single aspect of contact. It asks, are you an experiencer? How do I know if I'm an experiencer? Who are these people who are contacting us? How do I stop contact? Talks about missing time, talks about hybrids. It even talks about USOs, which are unidentified submerged objects, which are water UFOs. So there's a lot of information in here. It's very easy reading. It's enjoyable, and there's a lot of humor in it and a lot of reference material. So I do recommend it. If you're looking to know more about this phenomenon, it is available on Amazon.
Gwen, thank you so much. All right, folks, you heard it from the master of ERT, Gwen Farrell.
Love it. I got my copy of that book. I can't wait to dig in. You know, one thing she brought up that I wanted to talk about is she talks about how a lot of people may not even have any contact until they're older. But one thing I've found fascinating, I want to say Whitley Strieber was the first person that I read that talked about this, that he really did think his contact started later, but it was only when he started digging in that he realized, oh, wait a minute, there's this from when I was younger and this and this. And then it started kind of unravel so much for him. And one thing I love that the ERT can do is if that starts to happen to someone, you know, it can be a little mind blowing, and they can help connect you with an appropriate therapist or somebody that can really, really help you if that happens. Some people may only be contacted once, but like she said, it can be a lifelong thing. And that's a lot to digest for somebody.
Absolutely. And I will tell you this, Katie's, I will tell you, I'm a member of Gwen's team. I'm a member of ERT. And I have talking to experiencers, abductees, and things of that nature. And one of the things that you hit it right on the head. One of the things that they find is that sometimes these people who say I've had contact later on in life, they actually had contact when they're young, but they become in sort of like dreams, like fairy tales, like, and they won't see an alien. It's a rabbit, it's a duck, it's a deer, it's an owl. And they go to like a playground or this stuff. And the memory that's being input into them is such that they don't realize that they're actually being abducted, but the abduction is not going into the actual conscious memory because they don't see it that way. They see it as a dream, some kind of fairy tale. But later on in life, when they maybe have a hypnoregression or something of that nature, then that starts to open up and they realize, holy cow, that wasn't really a dream. That ship that came down wasn't a pirate's boat. It was really an alien craft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really happy to see Gwen Farrell and so many others continue the work of our dear late Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who recently passed last week. And to see his work, he talks about something he called PAX. And Gwen actually described it perfectly, how people will contact these, will move through these stages. So to see that is just great, and he will never be forgotten through the work of others. So it's really cool.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things about this, Katie and Cookie, is that it's very scary that this is generational. That, it kind of festers within families, that if you are an abductee, there's a good chance your brother, your sister, your mother, your father may very well have been abductee. And the scariest thing is that I've talked to people who are abducted, and they're very scared for their children. One person that I've talked to about his experience was that he believes his children have not opened up to him about it, but he believes that they have already been abducted. And he stays up at night, just thinking that maybe they'll come back. Don't know. It's a very scary thought.
Yeah, it is indeed. But experiencers can help other experiencers, right? I mean, especially when they can meet up and swap stories. And one place, obviously, that you can do that is conferences. And so I put together a little video. We'll show this, pretty regularly, conference alerts. I think we can all help tip each other off when there's cool conferences coming up. Amanda, do you want to roll that? Here's your conference alert. Coming up March 19th to 27th in Las Vegas is the UFO Mega Conference, a conference for minds fascinated by the unknown mysteries of our vast universe and committed to the Great Awakening. Check out more details at ufomegacon.com. Be sure to check out the 34th Annual Ozark UFO Conference in gorgeous Eureka Springs, Arkansas, April 8th to 10th, 2022. They always have great speakers and vendors, and Eureka Springs is an amazing place. And it's not too soon to make your plans for the MUFON 2022 Symposium, taking place in Denver, Colorado, July 8th to 10th. Mark your calendars and plan to join your fellow ufologists for great lectures, learning, and networking. See you there. Help us dance, get that turkey worked off, right?
Yeah, right. The mashed potatoes, that's my weakness. Oh my God. Give me more mashed potatoes than stuffing. Stuffing and mashed potatoes.
Oh, KDG, you're going to be speaking at one of these, right?
I am. I'll be at the UFO MegaCon, and this is now on the Strip at the Bally's, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm going to kind of get a little personal with this one. I talk about the High Strangers Colorado Ranch, but I talk more about that hitchhiker phenomenon that was just sort of touched upon in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And they talk about, I was surprised to learn that others have had this hitchhiker effect too. Kind of the phenomenon kind of follows you around. So I'll be talking about that and sharing some of my more personal hypnosis sessions with Leo. And I would just like to say really quickly that I'm not one of those that come out and say, oh yes, I'm a contactee and whatever. So I look at it very objectively, but yeah, I'll share some of it nonetheless. It should be a great time. So
yeah. Oh, I think I want to go to that one. Chris, what do you say? Maybe we can go together.
Yeah, I definitely got to get back to the conferencing. I used to do a lot of it, but with COVID and everything else, I kind of put it to the side. But I'm back in action again. Let's go check out these conferences and listen to these speakers, folks. I got to tell you, you go to these conferences, you will be amazed about what these people talk about. You will learn so much about ufology. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I always say, I love hearing all the lectures and speakers, and that is wonderful. But sometimes, you're sitting around just having a drink at night or even coffee in the morning, and you just get talking to someone. And I always have that weird feeling like maybe that's why I was supposed to be here, was to meet this person, to have this conversation and to swap ideas. So I love it just for that networking thing too. But yeah, Katie G, I'm excited you're going to be there. I think I definitely want to check that one out.
You're right. It's all about the people. I love networking too, and you learn more. You can investigate and do your, you're investigating there.
Yeah.
Interview people. So, Katie, I hear you've been feeling a little crafty lately.
I have indeed. Well, so I had some time off since it was Thanksgiving week, and I was like, what can I do to just not be working and be creative? And I put something together, and I actually thought it was something that our viewers might find pretty entertaining and maybe even want to make themselves at home. So, Amanda, can you run that?
My Katie, you are so talented. The only thing you're missing is a turkey being beamed up to it.
Or a cow.
Actually, I don't know if you can
It's
see it.
Thanksgiving, you got to have a turkey, not a cow. You got to wait for Christmas, then we'll get a prime rib and have that beamed up.
And hey, while we're talking art and we're just kind of having some fun here in the middle, I thought we'd start a new segment called "It's Art of This World," because I also love to see what other artists are doing. Especially if they have like a UFO or paranormal theme. So let's check this out real quick, Amanda. This is called Beam Me Up from the Here on Earth collection. The artist's name is Beth Conklin. She's an engineer turned stay-at-home mom turned artist. You can find her on Etsy. Search for Here on Art. And you can follow her on Instagram and Facebook at Here on Earth Digital Art. That's Here on Earth Digital Art. And that's this week's It's Art of This World. I just realized I spelled Here on Art wrong. That first one should be H-E-R-E. But yeah, I thought that was really pretty. All right, Katie G, I know you're always checking out cases for us. What you got?
Well, this week I have a case. It's case number 115596. It's from Joshua, Texas, May 21st, 2021. It happened at 1:37 p.m. So a daytime sighting, which I always enjoy those. The wind speed was 5 miles an hour, which is important for this one. So keep note of that. And here's a little description. Today at 1:37 p.m., I was waiting on my work van on the streetlight in North Fort Worth, Texas, when I see the object flying low at super fast. I start recording with my phone for 20 seconds. It was amazing to see this object with my eyes. I have the video. This case was closed as an unknown UAV. But I want to say I was so intrigued with this footage that I sent it off to our photo and video expert, Mark D'Antonio, and he actually put a little amendment to the case. And I'll just read you Mark's notes after he really analyzed this video. And this is by no way in means of going against what the field investigator said. We're open to the possibility that it's a UFO still. But just to read the photo analyst notes. Chief Photo and Video Analyst, I analyzed this video, and at first it was quite interesting. Upon closer examination, the video appears to show an object that is angular in its edges and not changing its rotation much. Then, as it moves further, you can see that it has something projecting from its left edge. This could be an unknown, but to be clear, it can also be a Marler balloon with a projection on the left side being the filler with possible string visible. The object's speed is important to examine, and since there are no reference values for the object, it can be a large object far away or a small object up close. My thought, small object up close, and here is why. The shape of the object is consistent with that of a Marler-type balloon, and the filler stem on the left side seems to add evidence for this. In addition, the object's size, if a Marler balloon its angular size in the sky would put it about 250 feet away at most, moving it in a path, taking it away from the vehicle from which it was filmed. The speed of the object is the only characteristic in question, and I believe that ground speeds were about 5 miles per hour. This does not mean that winds above the trees were not higher, as it is not unusual for this to be so. As a Marler balloon moving through the air, this object would be traveling approximately 35 miles an hour, maybe slightly less. One bird seen in the air appeared to be moving nearly as fast as the object in the air column, while the second one appears to be at a near standstill in the air column shortly thereafter. In my opinion, this case could be a UFO, but a Marler balloon that got loose from a bundle fits this profile. So that's from our photo analysis. But let's roll that video really quick, and you guys be the judge.
What the hell is that? Dude. Wow. Whoa, 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 whoa.
So you'll kind of see it start to tumble there towards the end. And I took two little screenshots. So Amanda, if you want to pull up the first one, there's where it's starting to tumble in the wind. And then the second screenshot is the one off to the left there. You could kind of see the protrusion and possibly a little string. It is cruising along there for a while though. So I could see where this could be closed as an unknown as well. It's really up in the air. So it's a cool case for a lot of reasons and a good one to learn from as well. What do you guys think?
That's booking.
Yeah, it was booking.
That's a lot of speed.
The only thing that concerns me a little bit, that usually you might see some kind of exaggerated movement and it was just straight a line, but I would look at that very seriously as possible crafts.
Yeah, right. It's 50-50 on this one. I mean, it is just straight line until it crosses that pole right there, and then it kind of will start to tumble and move kind of. So, again, that's why I was like, ooh, I need to send this to our expert, see what his opinion is. And he gave us his opinion. But this, the jury's still out on that one. I mean, it was closed as a UFO, and I can see why it was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's
it would be interesting to know what the wind speeds were on that.
Yeah. The ground wind speed, they said, was 5 miles an hour. And I was really examining the trees, to see if I could see movement in the trees. But as Mark was explaining to me, up higher in elevation, they can catch greater speeds up in the wind. So,
absolutely,
up there. True. So, yeah. Anyway,
that's a good one.
Chris, I know we only have a few minutes left here. Do we have a quick book recommendation?
Oh, God, yes. Alien Agendas by Richard Dolan. I got a chance to sit down with Richard Dolan and talk about his great book. And I'll tell you, after talking to him, I got a little scared. Watch this. Hey, folks, with me today is Richard Dolan, author and one of the best ufologists in the world today. And Richard, tell us all about your new book, The Alien Agenda.
Hi, Chris. Hey, thanks for having me on. It's good to see you. I wrote The Alien Agendas about a year ago at the very end of 2020. And I call it a speculative analysis, essentially about what I believe are the alien groups that are here on Earth with us. I've studied the UFO subject for over 20, 25 years, trying to be as conservative as I can in some of the way I put this data together. But I thought, I want to put together my own best analysis of what I think is actually going on. And there's nothing wrong with speculating. And so that's what I did, based hopefully on the most accurate data that I felt that I could acquire. So what I did is I looked at the long history of the UFO subject and made some conclusions. I think that we've been under observation / monitoring for a very, very long time by groups that are human looking. That seems to be the evidence that we have with the ancient stuff. And then in the last little more than a century, I do think that we've started getting the attention of other groups, very, very non-human looking groups. That is what it appears to me. And I try to break down what are they. You got grays, tall grays, short grays, insect type beings, reptilian type beings. Are they related? Are they not related? And I really do try to explore all of that as well as I can. I have another theory that I've formulated in this book, which I think is quite important. Excuse me, I call it the fourth stage of humanity, which is what I believe we are moving into right now as a species. And I think that this, in large measure, explains a lot of why we're seeing a lot of alien interaction these days. In other words, we as a civilization are about to leap right into their world. And by the fourth stage, I mean, in all of our long history, we existed really in three fundamental forms of human organization: hunters and gatherers for most of our time. And then we had the agricultural revolution where we settled down, we created cities, we created writing, we had, a really great civilization. And then in the last 300 years, we've had science and industry, roughly 300, 200 years even, which remade our world again. That's stage 3 as I see it. We were all born into stage 3, but we're moving into a fourth stage. And this fourth stage is including transhumanism and genetic mastery. It's including strong artificial intelligence. It's including 5G and 6G smart devices that will surveil people forever. It includes what economists call the robo-apocalypse, in which automation is just replacing human labor and jobs. And it's really creating a new form of human society we've never had, quantum computing and so many other things that are arguably disempowering us individually, but empowering us as a collective species. And I think that transformation is fundamentally changing what we have been for our whole time here on this planet. And I think that is the great change, and that is what is getting their interest, because this is really going to be putting us on some level of at least approximate parity with some of these other groups. I do believe that. I think it's been a mistake where we say, oh, well, we're just insects compared with these beings. Why would they have any interest in us? I don't agree with that. I think that's wrong. And I think that, in fact, progress is not a continuous thing. I think progress goes by leaps, and then it plateaus, and then it leaps, and then plateaus. And I think we're about to go to a plateau that might be somewhat equivalent to some of these groups, and therefore they are interested in our transformation. That's the quickest nutshell breakdown of the book.
Love that.
Are we ready for that next leap? That's my biggest scare. Are we ready?
Yeah.
I know.
I'm not ready for AI. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I thought it was interesting when he said disempowering us as individuals, but empowering us as a collective species. But that's assuming that we can actually get together as a globe. We were talking about that Reagan speech at the UN, years ago. And, what would it take for us to get together and truly work as a whole? I hope we'll get there.
I hope so too. But it is, as I said before, it is a little scary that we're jumping this fast, this far.
Right. Well, I think it is time for a break. That is a good segue. Coming up, we have David Marler is going to be a great interview. So stay tuned, and we'll get rolling with our special guest this week for Thanksgiving.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Hey members, the new KGRA-DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA-DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA-DB.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, the KGRADB.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Well, welcome back. It is
Caught me rocking out again.
Yeah, I know.
Here we go.
I have to give a little plug. My son wrote that, so it's pretty cool. Anyway, so we are ready for our special Thanksgiving Day guest. All right, our guest this week is David Marler. David has had a lifelong interest in the UFO subject and has actively investigated and researched it for 30 years. He joined the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, in 1990 as a field investigator trainee. Since then, he has served as field investigator, state section director, as well as the Illinois state director. David is an internationally recognized independent UFO researcher. He has discussed the subject of UFOs on many radio and television news programs over the years. David has assisted the History, Learning, Discovery, Science, and Smithsonian Channel on UFO documentaries over the years, in addition to independent productions. David has one of the largest personal libraries of UFO books, journals, magazines, newspapers, and case files from around the world that covers the last 75 years. With this, he has been examining the detailed history of UFO sighting reports and related patterns. And I have to tell you, my goodness, I've been to David's archives a few times now, and a day is never enough. 2 days, you need really a week. So welcome my guest, David Marler. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Katie. Great to be with you, Katie and Chris, and to you and your families and your audience. Happy Thanksgiving.
Well, happy Thanksgiving to you too.
Yes,
thank
you for taking the time for us. That's pretty special.
Absolutely. No, I always love sitting down talking about our favorite subject.
That's right. That's what we all talk about around the table, and everybody's like, "Oh, really? More of this? Oh, no." So, David, I'd really just like to really start off with, going back to when you started MUFON. I mean, I was born in Illinois, so I have a special connection and heart to Illinois, us Illinois people. So, tell us kind of what started you off on this path that you find yourself on.
Oh, absolutely. Well, my interest started at a very young age. I was 5 years old when I remember hearing the term UFO for the first time. And that was due to my father and his interest in the subject. And what had really drawn his attention to the subject was a wave of UFO sightings that took place in and around Piedmont, Missouri. And it had garnered lots of media attention. And that's actually one of the signs right there from Piedmont, Missouri back in 1973. They were having a lot of sightings, and my father was born and raised in Piedmont. So we had lots of relatives, his aunt and uncle specifically, that lived down there that had seen the lights, had seen objects, and knew the individuals that had seen the lights and objects. And this had garnered a lot of media attention in St. Louis. And one of the primary witnesses was an adult by the name of Reggie Bone. Reggie was the local basketball coach, and he and the basketball team, after having lost a game in a neighboring town, were coming back and saw this UFO in the sky. And I remember my father at a very early age saying, if Reggie said he saw something, you can take that to the bank, because as it turned out, he was best friends with Reggie growing up. They knew each other since they were kids. And so that was kind of my initial introduction to hearing the term UFO. And I remember my siblings and my father piling in the old Chevy with thermoses of coffee and binoculars to, quote unquote, look for UFOs down in Piedmont on weekends. They would drive down there. And many people, in fact, were flocking down there from St. Louis due to the media coverage. And then that was in 1973. And then 4 years after that, my sister and her husband had a close encounter with a UFO outside Kansas City, Missouri. It sounds cliche, but it was literally the spotlight right on the car, like right out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It left an indelible impression on them. They never talked about it publicly, but at Thanksgiving, like we're celebrating today, and Christmas, inevitably the story would come up over the years, and they'd say, well, tell us about that UFO sighting you had back in 1977. And then 1 year after that, there was a very similar wave of UFO sightings, similar to what occurred in Piedmont. But in this instance, it occurred in and around an area called Ellsbury, Missouri, which is just north of St. Louis. And it really was throughout the year of 1978. And local law enforcement were looking at these sightings and reports. Local law enforcement themselves had sightings of their own. And interesting side note, years later, I actually got to know the former city marshal that was at the epicenter of all the activity at that time. And he and I are to this day still in touch with each other. And I've interviewed him a number of times. And so I always like to say it was not a personal experience, and it wasn't a singular experience, but rather this continual exposure to the UFO subject growing up as a child that really solidified my interest. And then in 1990, became actively involved in investigating when I joined MUFON.
Right. I have to say, David, we have that in common. I mean, the 1970s for me, that is the decade for me. And that's where it really all began. I mean, albeit we had some early sightings in the 60s in Wisconsin and in Illinois, but that 70s. And do you find, I mean, you have access to so much research and documents and cases and recordings and on and on and on, and even the microfiche. Do you find, a question I have for you is, did you find that, the phenomenon, because it seemed to me a lot of the, you mentioned the spotlight coming down on the car and everything. Has the phenomenon changed through the decades from the 70s to now? Have you noticed that through all your research?
Well, there's certain elements that I think have changed. And I think you and your co-hosts will agree that there's certain things that we saw, say, in the 60s and 70s that we really don't see so much today. Saucer nests being one of those. We used to get reports of reeds being smashed down where apparent saucers had either hovered or landed. And you don't at least hear about them with the prevalence that we did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That seems to be something. And landing traces, I'm sure MUFON still gets landing trace reports and cases. But I think, and I haven't looked at the statistics, so forgive me if statistics prove me wrong, but we don't seem to have as many landing trace cases. And another example, really going back to the 1950s and early 60s, were the electromagnetic effects. It was almost ubiquitous that you'd have a close encounter with a UFO in a vehicle, and there would be some type of electromagnetic interference. Either the headlights would dim or the engines would stall. And of course, one of the best examples was the November 1957 Levelland, Texas incident, where multiple vehicles simultaneously stalled during the presence of this egg-shaped object that was witnessed by motorists as well as law enforcement.
David, I would love to go back to the sister experience. I mean, as a researcher, I'm sure you've asked her all the questions, probably driven her crazy. Any missing time, any radiation exposure?
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, Katie, because not only have we talked about it, but I'm certified in hypnotherapy. And approximately 15 years ago, we did regressive hypnosis, not with the intent to necessarily look for an alien abduction account, but really just trying to see if maybe we could provide some better clarity to what they observed. And so we went in really with that idea in mind. And it was interesting because I've done regressive hypnosis over the years. And we got to the point leading up to the actual incident. And she remembered relaying that she could see the spotlight around the car. There were buildings and trees that were illuminated like light, like daylight. And she remembers waking up. She had actually, just to give a little context, they had left St. Louis where they were visiting with my mother and driving back to Kansas City. They left in the evening and they knew it would be around midnight when they would get into town. And so it was interesting. My sister fell asleep. Her husband was driving. And she remembers waking up, hearing her husband screaming and punching her violently in the arm. And that's how she woke up, very abruptly. And her first conscious thought was, why is it daylight outside? Because she anticipated they would be arriving home between 11, 12, 12:30. And the first conscious thought was, why is everything illuminated? And there was no sound, there was no downdraft, so it wasn't a police helicopter with a spotlight shining on the car, nothing of that nature. But it was interesting. She remembers under hypnosis that rather than the light being more diffused, she felt like it was more focused through the windshield. And with that, she abruptly and emotionally woke up out of a very deep hypnotic state. And she just sat up, and her eyes were this big. And I sat there and I gave her a few moments and I said, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And so I gave her a chance to compose herself, to relax. And then we talked about it a little bit. She was able to remember certain details regarding the car and things like that she didn't consciously recall. But there was no indication that there was any type of abduction or missing time. However, there were some unusual after effects, if you will. For example, they continued to drive home. They were just in a mile or two of their home. This was very close to their destination where this occurred. They got home, and my sister is a creature of habit. Every time they travel, when they get home, she would take the suitcases out of the car, bring them in the house, wouldn't necessarily unpack, but they would always do that. On this particular instance, they left the suitcases in the car. They went inside, they locked the door, they went upstairs to their bedroom, they changed to go to sleep. Now, mind you, they were in their 20s at this time, mid to late 20s, I believe. And they both get into bed, and they both told me that when they got into bed, they didn't say a word to each other. They didn't say a word to each other when they got in the house. And they remember both getting into bed and pulling the covers up over their head. And the next morning they woke up and it was like everything was normal again. And then they started talking about the UFO sighting. So could there have been something more there? Possibly. But it's something that she hasn't really wanted to pursue further. And it's not something that I really wanted to push. And so it's definitely left an indelible impression to the point where, and I'm sure you can all appreciate this, having worked with people that have had close encounters. To this day, when she will talk to someone about the sighting, you can see goosebumps just completely cover both arms. She still gets goosebumps to this day. And, we're talking about an episode that occurred in 1977.
Wow. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it.
I can hear you. Chris, we can't hear you.
Oh, Chris got muted somehow.
Oh, no.
What happened to him?
Sorry, I was having a coughing fit, so I had to mute myself. Anyway, Dave, I want to talk to you about triangles.
Sure,
I know
Chris.
you've done a lot of work, and I've done a lot of work with triangles down the Hudson Valley area, which seems to be a hot spot for them too.
Absolutely.
One of the things I found out with triangles that some sightings have been absolutely silent triangles, but with other cases with triangles, there's been a low humming sound.
Yes.
Now, one of the things I've heard that the low humming sound triangles may actually be reverse engineered by us, that they actually may be a TR3B or Aurora, or I don't know.
Sure.
What information have you got? Have we reversed engineered them, or is this strictly, you think, alien? I mean, your best opinion.
Yeah, it's a great story, the reverse engineering, but the people that have really kind of promulgated those ideas have no evidence to back that up. It is sheer speculation. But I don't rule out the possibility that some of the triangles that people are seeing today, and by today, I mean within the last 20, 30 years, around, from stealth technology moving forward, I don't rule out the possibility that some of these triangles might be military. And to your point, I'm really glad you brought that up. I always like to tell my audience that we're not dealing with a homogeneous group of triangles. In other words, some of these triangles are silent. Some of these triangles have a low, decibel humming sound. And other ones are isosceles, where the other ones are equilateral. So what I've been trying to do is try to separate these into disparate groups and try to understand, are these coming from different points of origin? And it's very hard to tease out, as you can appreciate, Chris. It's just, there's a lot of stories about so-called government insiders that have leaked information. But before I can go down that rabbit hole, I need to have something tangible. But I think we need to be honest, intellectually honest, and be willing to acknowledge the fact that some of these may be man-made today. What I find particularly interesting, and this is the project I'm working on currently, to my immediate right, I have the historic NICAP case files as part of the KUFOS collection. And I'm going through and pulling, and I'm doing a lot of this work this week, as a matter of fact, over the holiday break, pulling any and all triangular UFO reports. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, NICAP, most of those reports are from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, so predating stealth technology. And what I'm finding are the same characteristics that I outlined in my book in 2013 that is being reinforced or vindicated, if you will, the profile I created, by finding all of these other historic reports that I was unaware of when I wrote the book, yet they're describing those same detailed characteristics, some of which are silent, some of which have a low decibel sound to them. And so it's very difficult. And another characteristic that we often find, many of these triangles are just that, triangles. Other ones take on, as you know, Chris, from the Hudson Valley, take on more of a chevron appearance, or a triangle with a little notch taken out of the back.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So how do we make sense out of that? Are they coming from the same point of origin, or are we dealing with different technologies originating from different points?
I like the theory that they're different technologies. The other question I want to piggyback on, when people have encountered these triangles, I've had people have physical effects, flu-like symptoms, ionized radiation burns. Are you finding the same thing too?
Not that many. I have had a few, but they've been relatively small compared to the general volume of reports that I've received. Some could involve mild eye irritation, that type of thing. And headache is another side effect that some people have described. And in many cases, when we hear about a UFO being silent, as investigators, we all know, well, that could be due to the distance. Maybe the direction of the wind was blowing the opposite direction. But as you know, Chris, with the Hudson Valley and many other sighting reports that we have of these triangles, the vast majorities are literally directly overhead. So when they say that they're silent, I take their word that it probably was, in fact, silent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have two questions. Well, one question, and then I kind of want you to talk about your book a little bit. But do you hear very many triangular or chevron shaped craft associated with abduction phenomenon? Have there been those?
Well, That's a great question, Katie, and let me try to answer it very carefully because I get this question at a lot of conferences. The book that I wrote was based on historical accounts, United States government files, British MOD files, as well as going through exhaustive news clippings, newspaper archives, microfilm collections. And so the vast majority of what I drew from were historical documents. And as we all know, the quote unquote alien abduction subject really didn't garner much attention in the media or in the news until the Betty and Barney Hill incident really surfaced, right, in the mid 60s after the 61 incident. And so if people had these experiences, they probably didn't report them to newspapers at the time. So I didn't capture that set of data. Now, that being said, since the book came out in 2013, to this day, I still receive on a weekly basis emails from all around the world. It just amazes me. And I have to say, I was very naive when I wrote this book. Never wrote a book before, didn't claim that I was ever going to write a book. But at the urging of many different people, I decided to put pen to paper. And as I got the information in the book and started getting it out there, I thought my job was done. I did not expect the amount of feedback. And by that, I mean people saying, I read your book. I was amazed to see that other people had a similar sighting as to what I had. And then in detail, they relay their personal experience. And some of these, they claim, go back to the 1950s, 1960s. And I found that to be very interesting. I did the episode about a year ago on Unidentified, the History Channel TV series, and that had generated just hundreds of people contacting me. And I apologize if anyone is listening right now. I never had time to get back with all of the individuals for that segment and for those emails that they wrote to me. And so my apologies. It's just very difficult. As I always like to say, I don't do this for a living. I have a full-time career. I have a family, and I do UFOs. And I think many of us can relate to that. So time is extremely limited. But what I found to be very interesting is when these people would write to me, a word that came up time and time again, which I have to say, as an author, I don't think you can get better positive feedback. They would write to me and say, you basically vindicated me. You demonstrated that I wasn't crazy. And many of these people would tell me, my friends, my family, my coworkers would laugh when I would tell them what I saw. But when I read these other accounts, you vindicated me. And it really emboldened them to continue to tell their story and share their experience. And again, what I find so interesting is we can look at the totality of UFO reports, and admittedly, it's wide and varied. But when you really drill down and you look at one particular subset, as I did with just the triangles, and certainly there's other avenues people could pursue, what I find interesting is the common characteristics time and time again over decades worldwide where these are being reported. And the point I like to make is when we look at the 50s, 60s, and 70s, even in the UFO literature, you will find examples, but they're very few where triangles are profiled or referenced. As I always like to say, if you were in the 1950s, 60s, or 70s, and let's say you wanted to fabricate a UFO narrative, chances are you're going to describe a 30-foot silver polished disc with a little dome on top that was hovering silently, maybe created a little electromagnetic interference with your car. But these reports weren't describing that. They were describing what apparently at that time seemed to be an anomaly, namely these large triangles. And so we see those characteristics from the 50s, 60s, 70s recurring yet today in 2021.
Asking about characteristics, are there certain colors, certain light colors that you see more with triangles than other craft?
Well, I don't know so much with other craft, Katie, but one of the more common, of course, are the three prominent lights at each point. Quite often, those are described as white. They can be described as amber, sometimes orange, or even red in some instances. Another variation, as Chris was alluding to, is sometimes these objects will only have those three lights. And quite often, in addition to those three lights, accompanied with that is an orange or red light in the very center. And initially, I began to think that perhaps these lights are not lights as we know them. Admittedly, if these things are from somewhere else, they don't have to adhere to FAA lighting regulations. I thought that perhaps that these, what we are perceiving as lights, are simply a byproduct of the propulsion technology. And I really started to think, okay, maybe we have something here. But, as you continue to collect more information, some of these ideas fall by the wayside. And the reason I say that is one of the other variations we have with the triangles, many of these triangles are completely devoid of any lights. Lights on the side, lights on the bottom, lights in the rear of the vehicle. They're just a black triangular wedge that is seen to be silently moving across the sky. More often than not, this is typically when the moon is waxing, where people can see the moonlight illuminating the sky, and then they see this dark triangular platform just silently moving with complete absence of lights. So it really kind of started making me rethink things, because if the lights are indicative of the propulsion technology and there's no lights, then why would this thing still be floating up in the sky?
Yes,
I have to agree with you. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Katie.
Oh, no, that's okay. I feel like triangles are landing less. We always hear about these big burned circles of, where the grass won't grow in somebody's field. I don't hear that so much with triangles. Am I just missing something, or is that true?
No, I'm really glad you brought that point up, Katie, because in my book, I noted, and in my lectures, I've noted, of all the historical accounts that I've found, I have yet to find one credible account of a triangle actually touching ground. There was one that I had from the 1950s or 60s. I'd have to check my notes. Outside of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, where a number of witnesses observed this triangle hovering over a field, but they said it was hovering about 12 inches above the ground, almost touching, but just not quite. I have had some people contact me, and unfortunately, I just haven't had the resources, the time to try to follow up on some of these reports where people claim that they did see a triangle touchdown. So I certainly don't rule it out as a possibility, but I found that to be rather unique. And again, when you compare triangles to the other types of UFOs being reported, admittedly, we do have landings. We do have burned areas, swirled grass, irradiated soil. But with the triangles, it seems to be kind of an anomaly in that regard.
All right. Now, I have a triangle case for you, Dave, as you're an expert on triangles, and I'm not, but I'm fascinated by them. I have one in the Hudson Valley, and I want to know if you have anything similar where a triangle is. I want to know, question number one is, do you see them attracted to water? And question number two, have you ever seen any triangles dump anything into the water? I have a case where a triangle hovered over a lake and dumped a barrel-sized object into the lake, and now the lake is having some weird things go on to it.
No, that's interesting. No, there has been what appears to be a correlation with bodies of water, and I go back to the first night of the famous Belgian wave, November 29th, 1989, where the two gendarmes, Nicol and Van Montague, saw the triangle hovering over the La Galeppe Dam. And this has been written about in numerous publications over the years. But that was really the precursor for that entire wave of Belgian UFO sightings involving these triangles. And they observed it hovering over the dam and over the Lake Galeppe for quite a long period of time before their attention was drawn to a second triangle that came rising up over the trees nearby. So yes, there's been a large number of triangles seen near bodies of water. And interestingly enough, not to digress, but also a number of triangles that seem to follow major expressways or highways, both here in the United States as well as in the UK. I've had a number of witnesses tell me that it was almost as if the triangle was just moving along with the highway, almost as if they were using it as a guide as they were flying through the sky. And of course, the famous Taconic Parkway incident with the Hudson Valley wave that you're familiar with, Chris. Yes. That's another one. But I do not have any accounts, so I'm very intrigued by this one that you're describing, where it actually jettisons something into the water. That's very intriguing.
Yeah, it was a barrel-sized object, came from a very credible witness, and now there's a certain spot in the lake that doesn't freeze. Normally, the whole lake freezes. There's a complete circle that does not freeze in that lake, and also they're experiencing algae blooms that they never had before. And I took a sample of the water, and there's no phosphorus or nitrates. You would have the strongest phosphorus or nitrates by the shores of the lake, and there's nothing. Had it tested at a lab.
Sounds like a great experience for the MUFON dive team, right?
Well, the village there that runs that place will not let a dive team in.
Of course not. It reminds me of, the circles where nothing grows and the snow doesn't stay there, just melt. It's dry, and then outside in the circle, like in Elbert County. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's too bad the divers can't get down in there. So Dave, can you talk a little bit about, and maybe you have some follow-up to the story that you talk about, or the cases that go over several counties in Illinois with several police officers, several witnesses of this triangular shaped craft. Can you talk about that case a little bit?
Yeah, that was really one that kind of garnered a lot of international media attention. That was the January 5th Southern Illinois Triangle case. And in fact, I wrote that up for the, I believe it was the March 2000 MUFON Journal. That was the cover story.
And what year was that again? Refresh my memory.
That was January 5th, 2000.
2000, okay.
Yeah. It started in the early morning hours around 4 a.m. And there was a over-the-road truck driver by the name of Melvern Knoll, who was the first witness. And he saw this light as he was entering his business establishment. He then exited and noticed the light seemed to be getting closer and larger. And then he stood there, and as he watched the light move to the south of his position, he realized that the light was affixed to a large object, which he described as a flying house with illuminated windows along the side. And he watched this thing silently move over the trees and then disappear to the southwest. I always like to say he was the hero of the story because he immediately hopped in his truck, drove to the other end of Highland, Illinois, notified the police, and really requested that they please contact police officers in the neighboring town of Lebanon, Illinois. And the picture you just had up there was actually myself sitting in the police department in Lebanon interviewing Officer Ed Barton, who was the second witness to the incident. And unfortunately, Ed passed away a few years after this picture was taken. So unfortunately, we don't have him with us anymore. But I really enjoyed Ed. I appreciated his candor as well as his sense of humor when we were out riding the roads and recreating his sighting experience. And something that quite often is brought up is this series of sightings, which I'll continue to describe, took place around Scott Air Force Base. And many people say, aha, it was near an Air Force base, therefore it must have been a military plane. But we had no records of any military flights at the time. And other people stated, well, maybe it was a blimp. And there's a skeptic that's been very vocal about attributing it to a blimp, saying that he contacted a company and they said they fly blimps along that area. But they didn't describe having a triangular blimp. And the one thing that's interesting is Ed Barton, who you just saw, he pulled his squad car over, got out of his car, turned the engine off, and the object came literally over his head. And I know this area well. I grew up in this area. So I not only know it as an investigator, I know it just by virtue of living in that general area for many, many years. And you can literally hear a pin drop if there's no wind out where he was standing. That's how remote it is and how quiet it is. And this object was directly overhead, made no sound. He said it made a flat pivot turn. It then pointed to the southwest. There was a flash of light, no sound, and the object in a blink of an eye shot off to the southwest. Myself and Daryl Barker, another independent investigator, I was investigating the case for MUFON at the time, but Daryl Barker was an independent investigator. We had the time of the communications with the police officers because we were able to secure the police dispatch tapes. We know where the officers were standing. We know where Officer Ed Barton said he saw it depart. We know when he said it departed. We then have Officer David Martin of Shiloh, another neighboring town, who then saw the triangle appear. And we were able to calculate the speed and the distance. And this thing clearly went supersonic, yet there was no sonic boom, which I noted back in 2000. And of course, now many people are familiar with Lou Elizondo always talking about the 5 observables. And one of those is, being able to go supersonic without creating a sonic boom. Well, as you and I and many other investigators know, many of the characteristics Lou talks about, we were already familiar with in UFO cases. But Officer David Martin saw this triangle. It then moved and stopped again, and then it shot off to the southwest. Another police officer in Millstadt, Illinois, Craig Stevens, thought these guys were crazy. He kept driving to different points trying to see if he could see anything in the sky, thinking that they misidentified something. He then drove to the north end of Millstadt, an area called Liederkranz Park. And as he was sitting in his squad car, he suddenly saw this triangle move overhead. And to Chris's point earlier, it made this low humming sound, like an electrical transformer, as it was moving overhead. And then it slowly drifted off into the distance. And then another officer who I interviewed in Dupo, Illinois, Matt Janey, he said he saw an array of lights, but he didn't see the object. And the array of lights seemed to be moving off to the northeast. Then about a year after this incident, we had another police officer, Mark Lopino, with O'Fallon, Illinois police, who stated he also saw the triangle. As the Illinois state director at the time and the local investigator, I wrote to Scott Air Force Base, asked if they were test flying any vehicle or supporting a test flight of any type of aircraft at that time. And they came back and stated negative. They also claimed that their radar was down at the time, which I thought was really giving me the runaround. But interestingly enough, in April of 2000 at the Eureka Springs UFO conference, I gave the first public lecture on the case. And when I stepped off of the dais, a gentleman came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and presented his business card. He was a technician with the FAA who helped install the radar systems at Lambert International Airport in St. Louis, and said, if you need any assistance with radar, I can help you. About 5 weeks after that, I found myself up in the control tower with the radar operators at Lambert International Airport talking about this. And again, I always have to tell audiences this was prior to 9/11, before security got really tight.
Yeah,
I don't think I would have been able to do that post 9/11. But it was interesting because these radar operators knew Richard, who was my contact at the FAA. And when he introduced me and said I was the investigator on that case, every single radar operator at Lambert International Airport was dead stone serious and interested, and were asking me, how's your investigation going? What have you found out? None of them had the tongue-in-cheek giggle factor. And they were extremely impressed with the caliber of the witnesses and the testimony. And I might add, it was a unique case in the sense that St. Louis media, both television and newsprint, treated this case very seriously. There was no derision of the witnesses. There was no ridicule factor. It was considered very serious, mainly because all of these witnesses, with the exception of one, were police officers.
Yeah. I mean, this book and your research into triangles really has propelled a lot of interest in the phenomenon. And you're right, people take it very seriously. You are the go-to guy, really, when it comes to triangles. Now, I know you've been on a lot of different shows like UFO Hunters and that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes. But first, Chris referenced me as the expert on triangles. I always like to say, I'm not an expert unless I have answers, and I don't have any more answers than the rest of you. So I don't
but
personally.
You're more versed than anybody else.
How about semi-expert? I'll leave you there.
Okay, I might go with semi-expert, but yeah, I can't take the attribution of expert. But the History Channel was wonderful. I was contacted by the executive producer after season 1, and I don't know about you, but I was impressed with the serious tone of season 1. I thought they presented that. Oh, and there's the UFO Hunters TV series from the History Channel that also looked at the January 5th, 2000 case. And they came and did a recreation and did some investigation on that. But we did talk about this case also on Unidentified with the History Channel. And Chris Mellon came out. And Chris and I, and many people don't know this, Chris had contacted me through a mutual friend of ours and reached out and said, I'd really like to talk to Dave about triangles. Can you facilitate an introduction? And so the gentleman contacted me and said, well, do you mind if I give him your phone number? Now, this was about a year and a half before even season 1 was filmed of Unidentified. No one had even known about that TV show at the time. And I was sitting in this very chair and finally got in touch. We my schedule and Chris's schedule. We were trying to get it aligned, and after about 5 weeks or so, I guess it was, we finally connected. And first words out of Chris's mouth was, Dave, I just want to let you know I'm a huge fan of your research. As soon as your book came out, I read it, and I've been following your work, which, coming from a guy like Chris Mellon, I was rather humbled by that. But we talked for about an hour and a half about his personal interest in the triangular UFO phenomena. And he also talked about the fact that, when he was at the Pentagon, he made inquiries. He was trying to figure out, is this indicative of some type of compartmentalized secret project, some type of aircraft, as Chris was alluding to, that maybe we were developing. And he said he pulled on every string, and all the strings that he had access to with all special access programs. He said, I could find no evidence to suggest that we had any such program. Now, admittedly, maybe he just didn't have access to that information, but given his position as the third highest civilian ranking member of the Pentagon at the time, that's rather interesting that he couldn't find any information on that. But he was extremely interested in the reports. And I think he agreed that, like I call these triangles, these are unambiguous UFO sightings. We're not talking about a little point of light in the sky you saw for 2 seconds. Yeah. People are very certain they saw something. It was structured. It was low altitude. It was there for a matter of seconds or minutes. It's not just a little point of light in the sky that could have been a shooting star. Certainly there might be other conventional explanations for some of these triangles, but Chris and I had a great conversation. And then fast forward about 3 years later, when I was contacted by the executive producer for Unidentified, he starts saying, well, we're going to do something different. We're going to do a different episode on a different subtopic of the UFO subject. And one we want to do is triangles. And I rather naively said, oh, you must have been talking to Chris. And he was really quizzical. He comes back, he goes, no, why would you say that? I said, Chris has a personal interest in triangles. And I told him that we had talked previously. And he said, no, I was completely unaware of that. I haven't talked to Chris since we wrapped up season 1. I said, well, if I gave 2 preconditions to do the show. I said, if the season 2 will be of the same caliber as season 1, as far as the serious tone and the way you present the material, I would like to be part of that. And I said, 2, I would like to do it if you can get Chris to come out so I can personally meet him. Yeah. And so he said, well, based on what you told me, he goes, I don't think we'll have to, have him kicking and screaming to come out there. And so Chris was very interested. And the one thing I want to mention, because this is something else people don't know, in this day of, quote unquote, reality TV, where everything is really scripted, I have to tell you this little sidebar comment. Many of the shows that we do are scripted, or they at least have an idea of how they want to do it ahead of time. It was interesting because they came in on Friday. We shot some B-roll, and they were doing interviews with myself one-on-one. And then they said, Chris will be joining us on Saturday. Well, Saturday comes, and we're sitting there, we're shooting more B-roll, and we're pulling out material and filming for the episode. And it got to be about 11:30 that morning. And I asked the producer, Danielle, I said, you said Chris was going to join us. Where is he? And she laughed. She goes, oh, he's here. He's driving around the neighborhood waiting until we're ready for him. And I said, what? And she said, we want you to meet him for the first time on camera. So it's real. It's genuine. We don't want it to be artificial. So, that just gives you an idea of how sincere they were in putting this production together. So literally, Chris was driving around waiting for us to finish. And then they finally called him and said, okay, we've got the camera set up. We're ready for you to come in. When you come in, Dave will see you on the security cameras, and then he'll come out and he'll meet you. So if you ever watch that episode again, when we are meeting, we are literally meeting for the first time. That was not choreographed or orchestrated.
That's really cool. That is one of my favorite series, really. It's a really well done series. I really do like it. We're going to shift gears a little bit. The Battle of Los Angeles, I've seen you present several times. You've been gracious enough to come speak to our Colorado group. Absolutely. And actually you're scheduled to come talk with us again. And One of the things you talk about is Battle of Los Angeles. Do you think that was a triangular craft? I know so many shots were fired and those beams of light, and some people argue that there was just the beams and there was no structured craft there.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the Battle of Los Angeles?
Absolutely. Well, first, let me, in the interest of time, I'll touch on the picture, and then we can certainly talk about the narrative itself. The photograph that most people look at, and actually that is the one I was just going to reference. What you see there in my presentation is a high-resolution scan of the original negative from the LA Times. And a lot of people go online, they look at the photo that you see that's prevalent on the internet, and with all due respect, it's worthless from a forensic standpoint. The best evidence that we have is the original negative. And the reason I say that is, back in the day of the 1940s, 1950s, they would doctor photographs. No malevolent intent behind it, but just simply so the image would translate better into newsprint. And the famous photo that you see ad infinitum ad nauseum on the internet regarding this case is the doctored photo, the one that was enhanced, where they just literally will paint on the negative or paint on the photograph to then translate better into print. But the one that I use or that I really focus on in my lecture talking about the photograph is the original negative that is not doctored. It's untouched. And you can do a side-by-side comparison and see the differences. But to your question, Katie, when you look at the original negative and you do basic contrast brightness enhancement, you diminish all the spotlights, you get those washed out as you darken the image. What you're left with is essentially an elliptical object like this. Now, again, people will look at the photo on the internet and say, I see a flying saucer with a little dome on top, a little cupola. When you look at the original negative, and Katie, you've seen my presentation, you know how I dissect this. Mm-hmm. You look at the image, the density of the object that's in the convergence of the searchlights is not as intense as the explosions that you see around the object and in front of the object. Those are very bright white circular blobs of light. The explosions, the anti-aircraft bursts that were captured at the moment the photographer snapped the shutter. It is very different from the light density of the object itself, which again, as I mentioned, is more of an oval or lozenge-shaped object. The cupola that people see in the photograph online, when you look at the original negative and zoom in, you very distinctly and clearly see it is actually 2 or 3 explosions that are occurring very near to each other or in front or behind each other. And you can see the outline of each individual light blob. When the photo was enhanced, that was all washed out. And so what you see is one solid image or body that looks like a flying saucer with a dome on top. And in point of fact, that little dome or cupola is actually 2 or 3 explosions captured at the moment the shutter was snapped.
Wow. I have a question. You're famous for your archives. Yes, you have quite a lot. I'm wondering, wow, look at that. Look at that picture.
That's where I spend most of my time, by the way.
That's incredible.
Is in that little corridor, as Katie knows.
My question for you is how recent declassification of documents has affected your historical cases. I'm wondering if you can go back and piece things together, like, oh, I know, I've got to go back to that file and, use this new info.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. My work has been, again, going through the CUFOS and NICAP case files, looking for historic triangle reports. As I'm going through some of those, though, I'm finding similar accounts to the Tic Tac example, the Nimitz incident, finding objects that are very similar to the Tic Tac shaped UFO that has been reported with the Nimitz incident from 2004. And you bring up a great point, Katie, because as I always say, no one UFO case exists in a vacuum. As a MUFON investigator, if you're going out there and you're collecting that data and you wrap up your investigation and you've done the best that you can do with the information at your disposal, the next step is to say, okay, this is what was described. Now let's look at the historical records. Are there correlations? Do we have other accounts that match this? Oh, that is Election Day last year, November 3rd, 2020. We had a moving van deliver 15, 16, 4 and 5 drawer file cabinets full of historic UFO case files. And that's just one of the many case file cabinets being unloaded and brought into the research room. And so, as you can imagine, I've only had these files since November of last year. And so it's just been about a year. And in addition to all the other projects I'm working on, I've been systematically trying to go through and organize the files and look for these triangle reports and see what other things I can find that, as you mentioned, might correlate with more contemporary reports. And one thing I'm also doing as I'm working through them, I'm taking all of Dr. J. Allen Hynek's original Project Blue Book documents, which I have to tell you is a treat just to go through and handle, and seeing not only, and there's an example, that's my Project Blue Book display cabinet. All of that is original Project Blue Book material. Just briefly, the top shelf there on the top is a 4-drawer file cabinet's worth of material I got through Rob Mercer in Ohio, who was able to find this cache of original Project Blue Book material that was taken out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in December 1969 when the project shut down by Lieutenant Carmen Morano, who you can see in the middle photograph there. And that's just some of the original 8x10 glossies, UFO case files reports, film footage, slides, inter-office briefings, interdepartmental briefings with Blue Book, slide presentations. And the little metal canister is a copy of the Tremonton, Utah footage that Blue Book had. And then the second shelf is Colonel Coleman. Colonel William Coleman was the public information officer for Blue Book in the 50s. And those are his 2 officers' caps he wore when he was with Blue Book. And then at the very bottom, this is one of my crown jewels of the collection. That is a military attaché case that has the name Dewey Fournay on there. And Dewey Fournay, for those that may not recognize the name, was Captain Edward J. Ruppelt's direct supervisor in the early days of Blue Book. And he was the Pentagon liaison officer for Blue Book. And I have letters and correspondence with an investigator and researcher, Bill Pitts from Arkansas, who he befriended years later. And he stated that military attaché case with his name on it is the original attaché case he took to the 1953 CIA-sponsored Robertson panel.
I'll never forget the day I was there with. I have an echo, don't I? I was there with Doug Wilson, and we were going through the original Project Blue Books, and he was like a kid in the candy store. Oh my gosh, I've never seen a man so happy in all my life, just holding the original documents, and I'm like getting my camera out.
Katie, I'll never forget his expressions, and I might add, and this will come as no surprise to you, James Fox was like a kid on Christmas, opening file cabinets for his production. Oh, there he is. There's James. That's us filming. James Fox, I have to tell you, myself and the cameraman were laughing hysterically because he would open one drawer and find one thing, and halfway through saying how excited he was to find this, he goes, "Oh my God, you have this?" And then he just started opening file cabinets like a frantic maniac, but he was just ecstatic. And I will say, and it's one of the best compliments I've received with regard to the archive collection. James has told me repeatedly, and I think he's even said it on interviews on various shows, that he could not have done the first hour of the phenomenon without the historical archive material here, both newspapers, government documents, photographs, and audio recordings. And so I felt honored that I was able to help James in his endeavor and putting together a yet another incredible UFO documentary in his whole film career.
Right. It's invaluable. And what's super great is, where it's going to end up, the University of New Mexico. And that's so important because there's, just like with Leo Sprinkles, we're lucky his is at the Heritage Center in Laramie. I mean, all of these big composites of UFO material. Please, people, please make plans so it goes somewhere where it's kept safe,
Thank you, Katie. Myself, Jan Aldridge, Barry Greenwood, some of the historians in the field, that's what we're trying to impart to people. Yes. Whatever it is, just make plans. And the reason I say that is so many collections, and I know, Katie, you and I have talked about this when you were here, so many valuable researchers' collections have literally wound up in the trash dumpster. When the researcher died, his fellow researchers' friends or her fellow researchers' friends didn't find out about their death until weeks or months later. They reach out to the family and say, just out of curiosity, what happened to your husband or your wife's research files? And in many cases, we were told, we threw all that in the trash.
Yeah, it's tragic.
Dave, I got a question for you. Have you ever interviewed Terry Lovelace with Incident at Devil's Den?
I haven't interviewed him, but we've exchanged multiple emails. He sent me his book, which I appreciate. And we were scheduled to actually present together at a conference. We were looking forward to getting together. And that was in late 2018. And then 2019, or I'm sorry, late 2019. And then 2020 hit with COVID and the conference was canceled. And I haven't had a chance to reach out to him since then, but I was really looking forward to sitting down with him and having that conversation.
Yeah, as you know, he got abducted by a triangle, and when he was returned, he had ionized radiation burns. Have you had any abductees from triangles that have had burns? Have you had any cases of burns at all?
Well, I haven't had any. Like I said, there were eye irritation and headaches are the only symptoms that I've had reported, physiological symptoms associated with the triangles. But I've had a number of people write to me about their abduction experience associated with the triangle. Again, as I mentioned, in the book, you don't see any of that because it's really derived from historical records. But the more contemporary reports, I've had a number of people reach out wanting to share their experience with their triangle and their abduction account. And in many cases, I've tried to direct them to individuals that specialize in that in MUFON to try to help them with that if they decide that's what they want to pursue, if they want to try to understand what really took place or uncover additional memories associated with those events.
Well, I certainly hope that you get a chance to meet Terry Lovelace one of these days in person because he has an incredible story about Devil's Den.
Yeah, I was so disappointed when they canceled that conference, but obviously, given COVID, it's totally understandable. And I am looking forward to going back. You mentioned the Ozark Mountain UFO conference in Eureka Springs. I will be one of the keynote speakers along with John Alexander, who I know quite well. We'll be speaking at that event next April, God willing. Hopefully COVID will not get any worse than what it is now, and we'll be able to have live in-person lectures. And as Katie mentioned, I'm looking forward to presenting to Colorado MUFON again in February. I just absolutely love the group up there.
Oh, and Eureka Springs is so special. I love that one.
It's incredible.
We've only got like a minute left, but I switching gears a little, I just want to ask, we have had definitely some disclosure, at least light disclosure recently from the government, but are we anywhere near where you thought we would be at this point?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Katie, because in January of this year, I was interviewed by Russian television, RTVI News, and they asked me to talk about what are my thoughts regarding this pending report coming from the Pentagon on the subject. There we go. That's Harry, the news interviewer there with myself. And they contacted me wanting to get my opinion on this, which I thought was very strange because I didn't know anybody in Russian television. I don't know where they pulled my name out of a hat, but they did. And at the time, I cautioned them and their audience that I think we need to temper our enthusiasm accordingly. And the reason I said that was due to the decades-long denials and obfuscation on the part of U.S. government agencies, intelligence agencies and otherwise, that I think we just need to temper our enthusiasm. I know there were people saying that this is disclosure with a capital D. They're going to wheel out the crashed UFO from Roswell and the dead alien bodies. And I just kept biting my tongue and talking to people like Chris Mellon and others to get their insights and their opinion. And they were equally tempering their enthusiasm accordingly. And as you mentioned, the way I like to phrase it, Katie, is I think we had disclosure with a lowercase d, just not an uppercase D.
Yeah.
Because even though the report lacks substance, and I think this is important for people that are relatively new to the subject, we had official acknowledgement of the phenomenon, even though we didn't have detailed information, which I didn't expect to get out of a public, unclassified report briefing. They did acknowledge that there is a phenomenon, and that is an extreme game changer when it comes to the UFO subject on the part of U.S. government agencies.
Right. And that is a perfect way to close out the show. Dave Marler, thank you so much for being our guest. And
thank you.
Dogs are gonna
It's
go.
been great.
It's been great. It's been so interesting. We really appreciate you spending the time with us, especially on Thanksgiving like this. So I really appreciate it. Thank you to my co-hosts, Katie Cook and Chris DiPerno. I hope you guys had a wonderful holiday day today. Thank you to all you listening. And a big thank you to Bill Skywatcher. and our assistant producer, Amanda Curran. You rocked it today. Thank you, Amanda, so much. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And next week, I hope you can turn in because we have a special guest, Mr. John Schuessler, the godfather of MUFON. So that's one you're not going to want to miss. You have John. So thank you, everybody. Happy holidays. Bye.